Let's call F and A together. City Clerk, you'll please note attendance. And we'll move on with the approval of the agenda. I've got one change to the agenda. I would like to move. It's the comprehensive fee study discussion and utility billing items up to the top. We have a member who has family commitments. So I'd like to get those done so she can go join the family. Any objections? All right, hearing none, we'll take that. Any with that revision to the agenda, any objections to the agenda as modified? Nope. All right, we'll go on with the agenda. Before you get up, just to make sure, any members of the public wishing to make comment before the committee tonight? All right, hearing none, be advised, we don't do online comments. If you have them, please submit them to email to city clerk and she'll get those out. With that, we'll move on to, let me do approval of the minutes dated March 4th, 2025. Are there any questions or comments, revisions in regards to the minutes? Chair has none. No. All right. And Carrie, you're okay? All right. Well, unless there are objections, we'll take the minutes as presented as approved. Hearing no objections, they are approved. Consideration of claims report dated March 24th, 2025. I have no questions from other council members in email. Staff has no queries at this stage. Any queries from Ms. Johnson, Mayor Councilman Johnson, and Kara, are you okay?
Yes, I'm fine, thanks.
All right, thank you. So we'll take the warrants as presented as approved to move those forward onto council. Wish I had two screens. With that, let's move to the discussion items we wanted. So item number 7, comprehensive fee study.
Thank you and good evening, committee. I'm Jana Walker, the budget manager, and I wanted to inform you that we posted an RFP in the finance department earlier this year for the comprehensive fee study. We received 3 proposals, and we've also had an evaluation committee rank each of those proposals, and we have selected a consultant to perform this study for us. And the value of the contract is below council threshold that we require council approval for. So we won't be bringing this further in an agenda bill, but I just wanted you to know that this is coming, this is happening, and you will see it either later this year or early next year. So as a reminder, we do not do a bid process in this. It's a RFP. So we rank it, and that may mean that we don't pick the lowest cost provider. We could consider qualifications or their work plan. In this case, we did have a clear winner, so we didn't have to go on towards any interviews, and our selected, it was a unanimous decision between Parks and Public Works, Community Development, and Finance, and we selected Matrix Consulting. I think that those are all the pertinent items. Do you have any questions?
So just one correction for the record. We don't intend for this to extend into the next year, but to potentially bring a contract or approve a contract here relatively soon. And probably the end product would be later this year or potentially early next year, I think is okay.
That's correct. Thank you.
Now I'm clear. Sorry.
What was the final dollar figure on it?
It's $49,300.
All right. With that, you want to move on to utility billing items?
For that, we have 2 items. Our first is that for utility billing customers, we are about to experience a change in our payment processor. This is not something that the city of Snoqualmie elected to do, but we are essentially required to do it by Springbrook, who we run utility billing through. What this means for customers is that after we make the switch, they will have to delete their saved billing information, re-add it, and then re-sign up for auto pay. And just a heads up that we will be sending out communications with April billing. The change should happen in early May, and we'll continue to communicate to our utility billing customers throughout all of this so that they can know what to do, when to do it, and have support as they need it. And then our second item is that we had an error in our billing. When the tax rate changed, we inadvertently changed the utility tax rate, which stays the same at 9%. We had changed it to 9.1%. So we will be processing in April, if things go as planned, a credit to utility bills that experienced this overcharge. And it's not going to be a large credit for the majority of customers. I would say over 4,000, it will be less than $1, but that is something that will be coming on utility bills. And you may hear about either two of those items in the very near future.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that. To hear something in Zoom?
Yes.
Yeah,
Chair,
go ahead, Karen.
just a quick question. Will that information also be going out on the city's socials so that folks may get the reminder or notice in more than one place?
Yes, we will be sending out letters in the mail. We will be posting something on the portal. So the people that this affects will all be on the portal. And then we will also be sending it out on socials. We'll be reporting it to the ROA so that we can reach as many potential customers as possible. And there
Wonderful.
is, I should add too, there's a slight grace period. The change is happening in May. If people don't change it in May, that payment will still be processed and we'll have a list so that we can do some really focused targeting of those individuals. And then we'll have one more month of grace period where we can hopefully hone that list down to as few as possible. We don't want to have anyone have late fees because of this change. So we're very mindful of getting this out to as many different people as possible in as many ways as possible.
Great. Thank you. That was my concern.
All right, with that, let's move on to Agenda Bill 25045, Professional Service Agreement with Burke Consulting to create City of Snoqualmie Strategic Plan.
Thank you, Chair. What you have before you is the result of the selection process for a consultant to perform that work. We had a tremendous response. When we circulated the RFP, there were over 9 different packages we had to review. We did an initial review and we whittled that down to the top 3. We had them came in and we did interviews with those 3 people. And Burke was selected as the winner. So staff is recommending to go ahead and we worked with them to develop the scope that's in the back of the professional services agreement. Should note that there are opportunities for savings in there if there's work that doesn't need to be done, but we did scope it out just in case it does need to be done, so we don't have to bring it back. Where all systems go, and Burke is planning on being at the council retreat, and they will be doing an exercise in the first half of that retreat.
Any questions from committee members? Go ahead and move this forward on F&A section of the agenda. We'll move on to the next agenda item. Will be 25046, setting date and time for right-of-way vacation hearing.
All right. May I talk about it?
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry. It's kind of awkward on Zoom. So, good evening. So NWBF LLC, they're the owner of what's commonly known as 39194 Park Street. They have filed a petition for a right-of-way vacation hearing. Street vacation petitions are typically submitted by the owners of the property, or sometimes the city can initiate the proceeding themselves. Under RCW 35.79.010, if the petition is signed by the owners of more than 2/3 of the property abutting the right-of-way, The legislative authority is required by resolution to set a date and time for the hearing to determine whether to vacate the right of way. So it's mandatory to set the hearing. It's not discretionary under the RCW. The other neighboring properties are owned by the city. So in this case, they're essentially the only property owner. There's case law regarding how this municipality itself does not have to be a signing authority. Council has broad discretion to grant, deny, or condition any approval of a street or right-of-way vacation. If after the hearing, city council decides to vacate the right-of-way, council is required to require compensation under RCW 35.79.030 if the right-of-way has been part of a dedicated public right-of-way for 25 or more years. Or if the subject property were acquired by public expense, the city may require the owners of the property to pay essentially the full appraised value of the area that's vacated. The staff recommendation is to have a public hearing on April 14th, 2025 at 6 p.m. Because the property owner is represented by a law firm. And we also anticipate staff and city representatives to want to address council. We're recommending also scheduling this additional time for April 28th at 6 p.m. The official public hearing where citizens or members of the public would be able to testify would be on April 14th, 2025. City council has wide discretion in terms of whether or not to vacate. And this is, I would just like to clarify, this is a legislative decision, not a quasi judicial one. There's a case involving, I think it's Okanagan County, that said that it's a legislative, so there's wide discretion. After the conclusion of testimony from the public, staff, and any attorneys, council may then adjourn to an executive session to discuss and decide. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
So you give me, this is. I guess I'm partially confused by the write-up down below. So the owners of the current property wish to vacate it and turn it over to the city?
The other way, they
Wow.
wish to acquire it and have a fee simple title to it.
Cause they built a building on it. Okay.
Sure.
Go ahead, Councilman Johnson.
If this is the property that I pulled up on Google Maps, if this is the one I'm thinking of, yeah, I think that it could be wise for us to go to executive session to talk about it when the time comes for that. But it sounds like, you know, this is essentially what this is about, is holding the public hearing that, if I heard you correctly, is something that is required either way, that we would hold the public hearing regardless of whatever discussions we have as a council, whatever decision ends up being made. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's required under the RCW to schedule the hearing and listen to all of the different opinions that will be presented. And then because this is there is potential litigation that can be discussed in executive session.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. All right, I didn't check. Carrie, do you have any questions? No, all right. Well, let's move forward to council. No objection to your date, but let's go ahead and have the discussion at council.
Oh, real quick thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just got a little bit confused about one little thing. So the public hearing would be on the 14th, and then there's something about April 28th. Was that staff was suggesting giving more information to council then, or the deliberations happening? Could you just remind me again what the April 28th thing was?
I'm not sure how long this is going to take and just how many members of the public are going to show up. So I'm recommending we book those 2 dates at 6 p.m. I think on the 14th, we would start out with a public hearing to enable the public, if any member, if anyone wants to come forward and has an opinion that they want to present to council. We are, under the RCW, we do have to post a sign at the property. We are mailing, letters to people that live nearby. We also have to publish a notice in the newspaper. So, somebody might be interested to come and comment. They are represented by a law firm. So I do anticipate that, their lawyer will, want to represent their client's interests. And then on the 28th, if we still have more testimony needed in front of council to make sure everybody had their chance, we can do that testimony. If we get through all of it on the 14th, that could be an opportunity for executive session for council to deliberate.
Thanks.
I think,
More fun to be had. All right, then let's move on to Agenda Bill 25041, correction. Oh, wait a minute.
Kara's.
Oh, Carrie, you have your hands up?
Yeah, I did. I was just going to raise the question of, to the extent that additional legal advice would need to be given in advance of that, I assume that would happen in the city attorney's discretion between now and April 14th.
we have, March 24th.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, with that, let's move on to Agenda Bill 2504 and correction of
Okay.
claims reports. Yes.
Apparently, this is actually a resolution to hold it. So is that consent or not? I thought we were just like saying we were going to hold a hearing, but
Yeah, this is setting a date for the hearing.
It's a resolution sent,
It's a resolution, so it can't.
isn't it?
It should be a resolution setting the date.
I'd say consent.
What are you doing setting the date?
Okay, I'm happy with consent. I have no objection.
Yeah.
Carrie, you okay with consent? Can I see you?
That's fine with me. Thank you.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, with that, let's move on to Agenda Bill 25041, correction and news report. Who will speak to this one?
So this was on the last F&A committee where it was a brief discussion about just fixing the claims reports because two of the columns on the right-hand side got cut off. So it wasn't, so we're not changing the report. It's just that it's now all the columns are visible. So it was more like a clerical mistake.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilor Johnson.
I thought we fixed that last, I'm a little bit confused.
So we did fix one. We did discover, however, more. And so
Okay.
consequently, we are bringing that more to you. What I will say is for the March the 5th, the recent one that is part of this agenda, you'll notice that that is in landscape mode. So the problem has been resolved.
So
moving
this is
forward.
clearing up some other ones that had the same problem.
Correct.
Are there more to come or is this it?
No, we've gone back. Yeah.
Okay. So those his heads already. Okay, I'm clear. This is, what was it, scribe error? I can't remember the term.
Scrivener's error.
I'm okay with consent.
Scrivener's error.
Scrivener's error, that, I was close. Any objection to consent on this one? Let's move that one forward on consent. Back up. And I think that brings us to conclusion of the claims reports. Will we have a discussion on the ERP status?
Yes, we do. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to share my screen with everyone. Presentation. So it's been a while since we've given you an ERP project status update. Certainly, council knows about our success when it comes to the phase 2 of the project, so human capital management, getting the payroll system up and running. But we kind of want to describe what we're kind of currently working on right now, the progress that we've made across all of the modules that we've purchased so far, as well as what kind of the 25-26 work plan looks like when it comes to the ERP system. So to kind of kick it off, I want to get into kind of present today. Where are we today? What's the status for today overall? And starting with especially the phase 1 of the financials. So we had certainly spent a lot of time back in 2023 into 2024 on phase 1 of the project itself. We then transitioned to focusing on phase 2, human capital management. And now we're kind of returning a little bit back to the financials of phase 1 because we've got to play some catch up now, especially when it comes to getting our 2024 financial statements out the door, as well as facilitating the 22 and 23 financial and accountability audits as well. So I kind of consider this time period through May of 2025 relatively a catch up in consolidating the gains that we've made. So our senior accountant has been working to establish kind of enterprise ERP year-end closeout procedures. She's been kind of troubleshooting some solutions that arise occasionally that we need to solve that will help to smooth out the system as time progresses. And then because we're producing these 2024 financial statements, the enterprise ERP system by Tyler is our 2024 system of record. So this means that Springbrook is no longer a system of record, which means we're now converting data from Springbrook into Munis to make that accessible for 2024 in total. The catch-up piece to this is because we've been so highly focused this past year on the payroll system, getting that implemented, that there are some things that we've been delayed in terms of getting up to speed. And so that is the catch-up period that we need right now to make sure that we've got all that data in place, that we close out 2024 appropriately, and then produce the financial statements that we then need to submit to the state auditor's office for May the 30th of this year. In addition to that, we're also kind of focused right now on the analytics and reporting piece of this. So the goal is to provide real-time access to reporting in ERP. So that primarily means budgets to actual reports. And so as a consequence, our budget team has been producing documentation guides to support that. They've been also training some of the departments. We've started with the fire department. So thank you for the fire department for their support and help with this so that we can really produce a product that we can then share with the other departments out there. In addition, what you're going to see coming up is it's been some time in which we've produced, for example, a quarterly report to council. And so we're trying to play catch up on that too, as we speak right now, is to kind of start really producing those quarterly reports so that you have timely financial information accessible to you. Just an example, this is kind of one of the guides that we're producing right here. We've got a very standard format. You'll see this for payroll as well as kind of standard format, but we'll be potentially as well, once I have a conversation with Jana, incorporating council into that too, so that you would also have real-time access to year-to-date reports as well. In terms of phase 2, human capital management, we're working to close out. And so this closeout period is going to really support us through April of 2025. What you see there is a project overview, which you can see that most of the different project phases are up to 100%. We're not quite there yet, but we're so incredibly close. Thank you to Jen and the Dream Team for their effort to kind of get us to this stage. Our goal is to kind of complete a number of documentation, as well as focus on some of the kind of remaining training pieces that we have to work on. So we've had recent training on salary and benefit projections, which will help us to actually forecast our salaries and benefits moving forward. So council may or may not recall, but we're often forecasting what our personnel expenses are using a manual spreadsheet process, 50 plus tabs and so on at the bottom there to try to replicate what our payroll system typically does. Well, now we can kind of translate the information that we have in our payroll system in order to produce projections that will support us when it comes to the CBAs and the analysis around that, as well as what we need to do for the budget. So that's been very critical. And then the last kind of element piece to this kind of training puzzle itself is quarterly reporting. So there's a lot of reporting that we do at the state level that we need to stay on top of. And so this training will help us to do that. It's often on a quarterly basis where we need to submit that documentation. They have to verify, sure that the numbers are all accurate and so on. So that's important for us. And then in addition to this phase itself, we have kind of carved out some of the project or a portion of this phase specifically tied around HR. And I've kind of set that aside as a mini project in which the HR team is going to be very helpful on that. And so right now we're working to establish a project plan for implementing those HR modules with the anticipated start date around June or so when it comes to that. When it comes to phase 3, this is the huge gorilla that we're now working towards transitioning to. So we've had an introductory meeting with a Tyler project manager at this point that will likely be our Tyler project managers just to set the table for the most part. But before we kind of kick that off, in our anticipation kind of kickoff period is around June or over the summer to kind of really start that process. So we have to focus on what do we need to improve internally first before we kind of start taking that leap in that direction. So there's going to be some utility meter rate and service transitions that we would intend to make between now and over the course of the year. As council knows, we're intending to adopt a new utility rate study here soon, which will require us to update the rate schedule. We also intend to transition to a new credit card processor. So you heard that from Jana Walker, a budget manager here recently. In the Parks and Public Works Committee meeting, it was just mentioned very briefly about the MaxiCom system and that going away. So there's going to be an effort where we have to transition from how MaxiCom calculates. And the reason why we're going to have to move away from it is because the guy that runs it is retiring. And so he wants to move on from that. But we have to transition from those zones that produces to a fully metered system for reclaimed water. So there's a lot of work that's associated with that that we'll have to consult council with as the future comes. In addition, there's potential changes to the application of the utility tax, making sure that maybe not necessarily that the ratepayers are paying that, but the system as a whole is paying the utility tax. Clean up of state returns, and then correcting utility tax overpayments, which we mentioned here briefly earlier with Jana Walker too. In addition, we have to start preparing data for the ERP system transition, making sure that that is as clean as we possibly can before taking that into the new system. So we're looking at trying to clean up some of the stuff in our utility billing system before we kind of really hit that ground hard and start configuring the new system, which is going to require the import of data and so on. So there's a lot of work associated with that. The Tyler project manager anticipates that it's going to take about a year to complete. So it's a really heavy project for a lot of us that we'll have to work on here in the finance department, as well as Parks and Public Works too, because they're very important as well.
So Drew, are you taking the utility tax off the individual's bill and having it paid at the utility level?
That's correct. So,
Why?
because that's the way the code's written.
Code can be changed.
So often you're applying the utility tax to the business, not necessarily to the ratepayer. So because the utility tax is applied against the business, the utility tax is a form of a B&O tax, right? So you really should be taxing the business as a whole. The business in this case is the city of Snoqualmie combined utility, not necessarily the ratepayers. So as a consequence, there may be something down the road where we have to transition, incorporate into the rate schedule, for example, the utility tax, and then basically apply the utility tax against the utility itself.
You run the risk, somebody's gonna look at their bill and say, you said my utility was only going up by 10%, but somehow it went up by 17%. Realize, or 19%, not realize that 9% tax was taken off at a lower level and brought into the utility.
So the goal is they're not going to be paying anymore. It's just how you're going to designate, right? So right now on your bill, it shows up as a tax, right? Overall. So the total remains the same. It's just instead of seeing a tax there, ideally you're going to see just your water charge, your sewer charge, and your stormwater charge.
Agreed, but then
Yeah.
they look just at the rate level and say, hey, you didn't do what you guys said you were gonna do, and we have to go through a long explanation of, yes, we did, it's just, we changed the billing, we
Yeah.
moved the tax in there and everything else.
You can surmise that this is not going to be fun, and it's not. So
Was there any pushback with the vendor of, I mean, your phone service has a tax called out, mobile phone service has a tax called out, I believe. Okay.
if you were to take a look at your electricity bill, for example, they're going to share with you what the electric charge is. And then generally what I've seen on page 2 is they're going to say, what is the impact of the tax overall that they're taking out of the electric charge?
Okay.
So,
Somehow I still
yeah.
want visibility of that utility tax
right.
at at the biller level?
I think there's more conversation to be had, so I'm not saying that, you know, that this is a fully formed solution necessarily, but I want to open it up to discussion about what this should look like, because I want to make sure that we're in compliant with code and making sure that we're also in compliance with the state law of how we should be applying these utility taxes moving forward. Because what the risk is the state auditor comes and says, well, you shouldn't be taxing necessarily the ratepayers, you should be taxing the system as a whole. And that therefore, it's a risk. So just to get into kind of the module progress overall, what you'll see here is you'll see the stages and the milestones basically from red to green overall. These are all the kind of stages that we go through for each of the modules itself. In terms of the financials, phase one right here, you'll see a number of the modules are in green, especially the darker version of the green, which is good. You'll see that are still kind of in the light green, and we're still have some items in the work plan that I'll share with you soon that we still have to kind of focus on a little bit to get us over that hill. There are others that we're going to start working on this year as well that I'll get into just a little bit here. And then you're going to see some other ones with some lines crossed out. So those lines are capital assets that you see there and purchasing itself. So the reason why they're crossed out right now is because I wanted to put a pause on those two modules at this point, because we're not going to be able to really focus on those modules in the next 2 years at this stage, given what we've got kind of planned when it comes to the ERP system. And therefore, I wanted to make sure that we're not paying annual subscription fees in order for those two modules that we might not implement for the next 2 years at this stage. When you're looking at capital assets, you're looking at something that would potentially help us to depreciate. The difference, however, is we're on the cash basis. We're a cash basis government, and therefore we don't depreciate our fixed assets overall, which means there's really no value at this point to the capital assets module to us overall in terms of financial reporting. And so if there's no value to us in terms of our need to financially report to the state for non-incorporating depreciating expenses and so on, or fixed assets as an asset category, then really it felt right to pause that, basically make sure that we're not paying for that, and then maybe reassess if we actually need that in 2 years. The reason why we had purchased capital assets back in 2021 is there was a prediction that the city would grow relatively tremendously over the decade, to the point where there could have been a consideration that maybe the city of Snoqualmie should have moved from being a cash basis government to a GAAP basis government, which would have then triggered a requirement for us to track our fixed assets at historical costs and then depreciate those expenses over time. And so as a consequence, because we're not quite there yet, we don't really see maybe the growth that we may have saw back in 2020 necessarily. It felt right to pause that and make sure that we're not paying the $10,000 to $20,000 for this module that we may not get into place anytime soon. Similarly, a little bit with the purchasing piece, you'll see that e-procurement is still there, but in terms of purchasing, that would require us to establish a requisition order system, which would require staff, for example, to submit a requisition order for approval first before making any sort of purchases and things like that. And at the size that we are and the workload that might require, it felt like it was the right decision to pause that basically, and then eventually come back and maybe revisit that, making sure that we're not paying for it. But if we ever do decide to come back, we can then kind of add it back potentially as an option overall if we want that module to move forward. So when it comes to the work plan for 25 and 26 overall, the accounting team is going to focus on establishing decentralized AP and general billing processes in enterprise ERP that would incorporate departments in the entry and approval of invoices. Our goal is to convert the daily bank reconciliation process from our current manual spreadsheet system to the bank reconciliation manager in enterprise ERP. The daily bank reconciliation process is a good 3 to 4 hours every day for someone here at the city. And the goal with that is to make sure that our bank statements equal what's in our accounting records. So making sure that those two match is very, very critical overall. And we're using a highly manual process to try to accomplish that. Also, we intend to establish a purchasing card program within the city that connects to the purchasing card program within the ERP, enterprise ERP system. And then another goal is to set up vendor access, which is what I hear probably the most complaints about from department directors, is how many invoices that they have to process overall. And so they would prefer to send just a vendor to a payment portal system to where they can then input their invoice and it would connect directly into our enterprise ERP. In terms of team budget, their goal is to complete the following 3 modules: analytics and reporting, project and grant accounting, as well as contract management. Those are all very key pieces to really the budget team and essential to our ability to kind of track what we need to and present information to council and provide the analysis that's required as well. And then we also need to support the transition of our business licensing and B&O tax program to a new solution as well. So currently that is not covered by the enterprise ERP system at this point. And so we're going to have to explore the options that might be available to us for how we can accomplish that. It is the only core service that doesn't have a direct module right now in the enterprise ERP system by Tyler, but has one within Springbrook. So we need eventually a solution for how to handle those B&O taxes. When it comes to HCM, a lot less modules to kind of explore a little bit. You'll see payroll and time and attendance in green. And then I mentioned as well as that human resources and recruiting piece, that mini project that we've set aside in which the HR team is going to be focusing on starting over the summer, generally overall, is still in the initiation and planning phase. When it comes to the work plan for team accounting, it's to close out the payroll system and time and attendance to make sure that that is clear and done with for the most part, and then work towards supporting the integration of payroll with other modules as necessary. So there are phase 4 of this project was enterprise asset management, for example. There are connective tissues between payroll and the work order system that could be beneficial. For example, if a employee in the field, is servicing a work order, the time that they spend in that work order could be translated into our time and attendance system for us to be able to process payroll. So there are those connections that we can kind of work towards making. Team budget, utilizing the salary benefit projection program and estimating the cost of CBA proposals and in developing estimates for the 27-28 budget. And then, as I mentioned, team human resources, really completing those outstanding HR modules. When it comes to utility billing phase 3, I've combined both the module progress and the 25-26 work plan. The goal is to really kind of start that this year and work towards completing the modules between now and the end of 2026. And, the human capital management, so getting payroll up and running impacted our internal customers, which are the employees across the city, but we have to be very delicate and sensitive and making sure that all of the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, because this impacts the public. When you think about the utility billing system, is probably the highest touch point for a lot of people with the city is through that itself. So it's important for us to make sure that we get that right. And so we're going to be very cautious going into it. I know some eager people out there within the department that kind of want to get that started, but we have to have a very, very planned out process for how we're going to accomplish that. Enterprise asset management. This has normally been under the purview of Parks and Public Works, but they've done a great job getting a lot of this across the line. So you'll see the modules here either completed or closed out. They still have some hours kind of left over from that they're going to utilize effectively to support what they need. But we're thankful for their effort. And I believe they went live back in September, October of last year. So with that said, just going to get into the budget a little bit. We still have budget left. So the life of project budget overall, $3.37 million in total for this project. So far, we've spent about $2.27 million. When it comes to the professional services provided by Tyler, we still have a lot of room kind of left to go. So that's a lot of the hours that we would spend with the implementation consultants. In terms of some of the other expenses overall, we are not looking to hire necessarily additional resources or bring them on board, primarily because we have spent that money prior to me necessarily being the finance director here at the city of Snoqualmie in terms of bringing that temporary labor on board to support the project. And it wasn't quite as successful as we were hoping for at that time. And so I think we've taken a different tact overall. Certainly helps to have excellent staff like Jen back there as a part of the team to help kind of drive this project forward. And so in terms of progress overall, Just to give council an estimate, it feels that we're probably roughly around 60 to 65% or so. I mean, that's a very narrow range, but in terms of our progress through this project in total. So with that said, happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Kara, any questions? Nope. Okay, and I kind of popped mine off in the middle of it, so,
Mhm.
all right, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, right, that was we did the comprehensive fee study, utility, upcoming agenda items, informational finance department status update. That's an upcoming item?
Yeah, so
Alright.
not
Not tonight.
necessarily about the ERP status, but about the department overall and where we intend to take the department over the next 2 years.
Future meeting.
Oh.
Future meeting.
Future meeting. Yep.
Mhm.
Understood. All right, let's move on to the council agenda. Let's move on to draft council agenda for the retreat. To talking the strategic plan from 9 to 12, lunch from 1 afternoon. We could do tour of Meadowbrook, tour of Splash Pad, tour of Reclamation Facility and other. I think we did the reclamation facility last time. Any desires, suggestions, or other items to put on here? Or is this, take this to council for further discussion? Go ahead, Councilman Johnson.
So the only thing that I'd like to hit, maybe it could be done during the strategic plan discussions, but I'd like to go back to our council priorities from from last year's and just kind of see how we did. What things do we check off the list? What have we not checked off the list? Is there anything new that we would like to add or anything that we feel like we want to take off? I don't know what that would be, but but just basically kind of have some time to look back at that and reflect as a council on kind of how we're doing.
Chambliss has his hand raised.
Thomas has, city administrator has his hand raised.
Yep, Mike?
Mark Pro Tem, if we don't do the tour of the wastewater reclamation facility, I would encourage council to reach out to Tom individually and go on a tour. It is a whole new plant now. The process has changed considerably, and I do feel strongly that everybody should get a look at what you guys bought.
Okay, okay, I'll withdraw my comments prior and,
Member Christensen has her hand up.
sorry?
Councilmember Christensen has her hand up.
Kara, Councilman Christensen?
Yeah, for the tour, I don't believe that anything has really changed over by Eagle Lake, but I did want to confirm that was accurate, because if there are things that have changed, then that might be worth seeing, but I think that the last point I drove past, it was just, I think, the sign up and some flags. But could I get confirmation?
The new reservoir?
That project hasn't started yet.
Construction starts in May.
Did you catch that, Kara? Construction starts in May, so nothing has changed this time.
Perfect, thanks.
Other than we own the property now.
Nothing we own the property. That's an important fact.
Around on it.
And so we can have someone can provide a tour, maybe Mary Norton or maybe someone that's on the Preservation Association for Meadowbrook, if anyone is interested. We can set that up.
Meadowbrook, so my suggestion is from maybe 1 to 2, we have the council goals and objectives discussion. And from 2 to 4, we do tour and we probably do the water reclamation. We've got structure in place for Meadowbrook and everything else, so it's not direct city responsibility. So maybe tour the reclamation facility and the splash pad in the afternoon. But let's have that discussion in council. Councilman Christensen?
Yeah, for Meadowbrook, I think that a number of us will be at the SVGA dinner the week before as well, right? Isn't that where the
Same week.
location is for next week?
Right, so we're there Wednesday night and then Friday for the council retreat,
Yeah,
so.
so we may be toured out by that point in time.
And as long as we're there, from noon to 1, we can have discussions focused around Meadowbrook during lunch too, if we need to. Okay. All right, with those comments, but let's have discussion at council before we narrow it down on things. All right, with that, let's move on to council agenda. You're gonna have to zoom a little more than that. Oh, what?
Yeah.
Oh, Carrie, you've got your hand up? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I think it was still up.
Okay. All right, keep an eye on that. I'm going to run through on my screen. All right, so we're gonna start at 7 o'clock,
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. At the top, can you change? No, you've got it. Roundtable at 6 o'clock, regular council meeting at 7. I'm sorry, didn't see that. All right, roundtable, we have basically 2 executive sessions in the roundtable section.
Mhm.
All right. All right, then we'll do regular agenda at 7 p.m. Pledge allegiance, agenda approval, public hearings, utility rates. Yes, Councilman Johnson.
Just one thing, we call it roundtable. I wonder, is that something that is by our rules and procedures that we would always call that section the roundtable if we're not doing a roundtable?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, versus special meeting, that would be what we had today.
Okay.
Earlier.
Call it workshop. All right, all right, public hearings, utility rate 2025, public hearing, and then we'll have appointments. Chairman of office for police officer Dylan Losvar.
That's fine.
Got that right?
Close far.
That's fine.
And then public comment, consent agenda, approved city council meeting minutes and claims report dated 2024. I think we also moved up out of Parks and Public Works. Where'd he go?
It was an add-on.
The add-on item goes up in consent.
Mhm.
All right. Please, and we'll go from there. Did we have any from FNA? The correction to claims reports, we're okay with that going to a consent agenda? And then rest remain. All right, with
Setting-
that, go ahead.
The setting of the date and time for the right-of-way was moved to consent. Because that was a resolution.
I'm okay with it. Or should we have that as council discussion?
I think it should be consent because we have to do it either way.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, let's move that to consent, but probably make sure everybody's aware. We're gonna do it on the 14th and possibly 28th.
And then 2 of the items from public safety were moved to consent.
Which items?
The ambulance service agreement and the Sunnyside Jail.
Okay. Well, we'll take a look. With that, and then we'll move into ordinances. We have ordinance 25003, amending the utility rates for year 2530. After that, we'll have committee reports, public safety. So ambulance services go to consent, Sunnyside Jail goes to consent. We have Yakima County Services Interlocal Agreement remains on committee report.
Correct.
Okay. Community Development has no items at this stage. Department of Public Works has no additional items in the consent item. And Finance Administration will have correction and claims report went to consent. So so did setting time and date of right-of-way vacation. We'll just have professional service agreement with Burke.
Correct. And then
Uh,
we'll add the committee of the whole for the retreat agenda.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Committee whole will add in council retreat agenda. From there, we'll move into reports. If we're doing the 6 o'clock, are we gonna have another executive session at the end?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Seriously? All right. All right. We'll leave it there.
Just one for now.
Just one for now, and we'll see what happens. So we got a whole week. All right. And then move to adjournment. Any other questions or comments in regards to that? All right, unless there are objections with the revisions so noted, we'll move the council agenda forward to council next week. That, I believe, we are complete with the agenda. Anybody objecting to adjournment? Hearing no objections, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.